Bill, finish the meeting. Okay. All right. Meeting is now in session. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence.
Take a moment to remember the 5 firefighters and 15 police officers that have passed since the last meeting.
Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, well, welcome everybody to our February meeting. And to start off our agenda here, we have our executive session that we will be going into, and I will go ahead and read them off for the motion. Vote to go into executive session on personal matters pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A1 in regards to the fire chief's contract and evaluation process. Legal advice pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A3 and regarding the same for instructions to legal counsel pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A4 regarding the evaluation process. Secondly, under the same motion, vote to go into executive session relating to the following items pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A5, discussions or consultations with the designated representatives of the public body in order to consider its position and instruct its representatives regarding the district's memorandum of understanding, legal advice pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A3, legal advice and ARS 38-431.03A4, instructions to attorney regarding the memorandum of understanding. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No, we are now in executive session. Yes, sir. Yes, I think we are. Okay, welcome back. We're back in open session, and as a result of executive session, the chair would like to give direction to the chief on the following items. Chief, as per, is this in the sense of a motion, Bill? Okay. A motion to make the following directives to the chief for direction. As per executive session, to modify the contract, this would be for the chiefs, this would be for you. Yes, you, for Bill, to modify the chief's contract as recommended in executive session as it relates to the annual evaluation. Okay, thank you. Furthermore, that the evaluation be submitted no later than March 3rd, and that be placed on the agenda for March 17th meeting for further consideration. And lastly, for Chief Trautwein to proceed with the meet and confer process with labor to pursue the tuition reimbursement language as we discussed from the July 1, 2019 date. Okay. Do I have a second on those?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Motion's passed. Thank you, and thank you all for being patient and waiting. It was a little bit lengthy, but we had a lot of stuff to hammer out. As we reconvene into public session, do we have anyone speaking from the public? Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is our consent agenda, which consists only of our January 14th, 2020 regular meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
I so move.
Any further discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the financial report and updates from our finance director, Gabe Boldra. Gabe?
All right. We're ready in a second. Okay. All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, you have the January financial report in your packet. Starting off, our revenue for the month of January, you'll see our property tax revenue was $679,000. That put us about $270,000 under where we kind of budgeted to be for the month. We are under year to date, but it's not as far of a variance. And again, you know, a reminder to the board that this is a function of timing on collections from the county. We're still going to see the revenue. It's just we're off from our historical averages. Non-levy revenue was at $182,595. We were under budget by $27,000, and more significantly, being under budget on ambulance revenue were the biggest driver for the variance on our non-levy revenue. On expenses, our total expenses for January were $1,625,000. We were under budget by $92,000. On that, our personnel expenses were $1.4 million, which was under budget by $64,000. Really, some vacancies are the biggest reason that we saw that variance for the month of January. Buildings and land did spike a little bit for January. We were at $64,749, which is over budget by $27,000. That was due to a deposit on evaporative cooler purchase, so kind of large purchase hitting in the month. Vehicles and equipment, total expenses at $25,683, which is under budget by $26,000. Communications and IT, we were at $78,350. And again, that category was over budget by $6,300 for the month, and that was due to some radio tower repairs that we had to pay for. And finally, managerial expenses under budget at $32,389. Moving on, year to date, our total revenues are $12,319,000, which puts us over budget by $467,000 for the year. As I mentioned, property tax revenue is trending behind. We're about $100,000 behind on property tax revenue for the year to date. But our non-levy revenues are $576,000 over budget, and that makes up that. And the majority of that is related to wildland deployments. On the expenses, our total expenses year to date are $9,195,000, which puts us $696,000 under budget for the year. Personnel is the biggest driver there, $7.7 million in total personnel expenses, which is $565,000 under budget. Buildings and land, that purchase that kind of occurred in this past month has pushed us over year to date on buildings and land, so $297,545, which is the $33,000 over budget. Vehicles and equipment, communications and IT, and managerial all are, you know, I shouldn't say significantly, but reasonable variances under budget from a year-to-date perspective as well.
If I could interrupt you for a second, is the new maintenance vehicle for the apparatus, is that any closer to being here, or is it here already?
The vehicle is getting shipped from Indiana out to Arizona in the next week or so, and we should, according to the dealership, have it mid-March.
Got it. Thank you.
And I have a question, Gabe.
Yes.
In terms of the personnel that we're not using our full budget, that's because we have some vacancies?
That's correct, yes.
And would that be within the firefighting system? Because I see managerial also is under budget. Is managerial administration personnel or?
No, so personnel is all personnel, so it's all district personnel. So there's, you know, some of the vacancies that we had this year is one, obviously the fire chief position.
Mm-hmm.
We also had an administrative position, the GIS position, telecom position, and then, so that's really kind of some of those driving factors behind there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, sorry. And then, so percentage of expenses year to date, we're at, 7 months through the year, and 57% expended with 43% remaining. Percentage of expenses by function, you see personnel are highest at 84%, operations at 8%, communications at 5%, and managerial at 3%. And just kind of expand on that a little bit. Managerial expenses, we kind of put in like liability insurance, professional fees, legal expenses. Those types of items are the ones that hit kind of that managerial expense category. Cash position year over year, we ended the month with 11.1 million in total cash, compared to the prior year of 9,022,000. It puts us about 2.1 over where we were last year at the same time. Other assets increased from 20 million to 21.5, and our liabilities increased, and that's primarily due to year-end accruals, you know, for vacation and sick liability, as well as like our pension liability, which I'm going to actually talk about next. So I will, I noticed they're agendized separately, so I don't know if you guys want to accept the finance report, and then I can go into the PSPRS actuarial report, or
Combined or separate? Yeah, let's do that. Thank you, Bill, for clarifying that.
I can.
Yes.
Yeah,
Motion.
I move to approve the financial report for January of 2019.
2020.
Thank you.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Then the financial report is approved as given. At this point, Gabe, if you want to move down to the other update, the PSPRS update, is that what that was?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Perfect. So, Mr. Chair, members of the board, we've given an update to the PSPRS Pension Board on the June 30th, 2019 actuarial, and the chair had asked if we kind of give the full board kind of a similar update. So, the actuarial evaluation was completed. We got the report, I want to say November, December time period, and you know, are out of the new actuarials, a couple changes. You'll see we went from a contribution rate, which is that top number there on pension, of 34.73 to 38.37. And tier 3 actually went down. They went from 9.8 to 9.21, and you can see the health rates stayed pretty even. Why that changed? You know, a couple things. One was the overall fund performance. So the tier 1 fund saw an average over their smoothing period. So they'd look at a 7-year window for tier 1 and 2, and then they look at a 5-year window for tier 3. So over that 7-year window, the fund performance was 5.4%. In the actual last year, though, the fund actually produced 6.7% return. However, the actuarial assumption was 7.4. So neither one of the benchmarks they looked at actually hit the fund performance. On tier 3, though, over the 5-year smoothing, they actually hit 9%. Their 1 year was 7.3, and the assumption was 7.0% on that one. So that's why tier 3 actually did so well, and we actually see a decrease because the fund performance did so well.
And again, Gabe, this is as it pertains to the Sedona PSPRS, is that correct?
That's correct. This is Sedona specific. What just happened? No idea. Some other assumption changes occurred as well. The new actuaries actually looked at the mortality tables for PSPRS and compared them with the actual experiences, and realized firefighters actually live longer than the general public. So they've adopted a different mortality schedule now, which obviously now means the assumption is the benefits are going to be paid out for a longer period than originally assumed. Another big change that impacted our rate for next year is the earnings assumption. They went from the 7.4 that we're not hitting to 7.3. But the biggest reason is PSPRS and the actuaries recognize that they need to change the earnings assumption down. However, any changes in earning assumptions have a significant impact on contribution rates. And when I get into our unfunded liability, I'll tell you how much an earnings assumption can have as an impact on our unfunded liability. So that's why they are doing it very slowly, because of the large impact that a significant drop can take. And I should have checked on this, and I completely forgot. You know, one of the reports was showing where they need to lower the assumptions rate to, and I can't remember the exact number, but it would be a 25% contribution rate impact. So we'd go from 38 to, you know, 63% contribution rate. So for every dollar of wages, it'd be, you know, $63 or 63 cents to PSPRS. So obviously they can't do that, and they're not going to do that. But they are year over year going to continue to lower that assumptions closer to the actual experience. Going into kind of the evaluation. So here's kind of the breakdown, and this is what I always like to point out. Whenever, you know, people are like, PSPRS is really expensive, and you know, it's the normal cost of the pension isn't what is hurting us. It isn't the expensive part, and you can see from here, total normal cost is 21.69%. Of that, the employee is responsible for 7.65. So our net normal cost is 14.04%. And you see that's only a 0.04 of a percentage point increase from the prior year. So if we were only paying 14.04% into PSPRS and seeing a 0.04 of a percent increase year over year, that's a pretty sustainable system. The problem is we go down to the amortization of the unfunded liability. And that's where we've got we're paying 24.33% versus the prior year we're at 20.65%. So that's what's increasing, and that's what's impacting our pension costs. And that's where it gets into, it's all assumptions. And it's also obviously the loss in fund balance over the years. But that's what's really driving our PSPRS costs. So you can see that breakdown there of the total cost of $2.5 million for PSPRS. 1.6 million of it is the unfunded liability component.
So are you saying that their assumption earnings was too aggressive? They didn't meet it, although they did earn something. And now they're trying to be a little bit more conservative, but it's not growing nearly at the rate that we want it to.
Right.
But we're not making the big mistakes.
So the forward health of the plan, how do I say this? The plan itself and the benefits assigned to the plan isn't really the issue. It's the stuff that's happened in the past that's created that unfunded liability, and that unfunded liability compounds on itself. And that's where it's getting out of this basically this 21, I think ours is $21 million unfunded liability. But as each time assumptions change, that $21 million changes. Yeah. Right. Tier 3, you could see the breakdown on the Tier 3 costs. So the normal pension cost for Tier 3 as I mentioned before, has dropped. So it's gone from 19.46 to 18.41. But again, when you get down on Tier 3, here's one of the things we didn't really know when the whole Tier 3 first came out. Everybody thought it was going to be a great, more affordable option when new hires come on board, is when you get down here to the bottom, that amortization of unfunded liabilities, that legacy cost, right, is the third one up from the bottom at 24.51, is calculated in the Tier 3 cost as well. So our Tier 3, although it is slightly cheaper than Tier 1 or 2, when you add in that unfunded liability component, it's still a rather expensive plan as well. So our unfunded liability. So if you look at the pension, you see our actual present value of benefits. So for retirees and beneficiaries, 20.5 million, drop members 2.5, vested members 411, and active members of 37. So that total, basically, present value of all the benefits is $60 million. Our liability, though, of our active members is 23 million. Our inactive members is 23 million. So those are our members that are retired from the plan. Active members are the currently employed of 26.8 million. So the total liability is that 50 million. However, our actual value of assets is 28 million, which is creating our unfunded liability of 21.6 million. And so going back to the assumptions, a different auditor for one of our other clients put actually a sensitivity analysis in the audit report. And what I thought was interesting about it, and what I explained to the pension board, and same to here, is so much of that 21.6 million is impacted by assumptions. If we this 21.6 million is based on an earnings assumption of 7.3%. If we change that earnings assumption and say we're going to make 8.3%, we could see that 21 million actually drop to 10 to 12 million. If we say the earnings assumption is going to be 6.4%, that unfunded liability goes from 21.6 to almost 30 million. So just a 1 percentage point swing is nearly a $10 million swing in the unfunded liability. So professionally, it's one of these things that we need to continue to derive and develop plans to put monies aside to address the unfunded liability. But until we see some more stability in the fund and PSPRS, my recommendation with all my clients is we set up a fund, we put the money aside, we hang on to the money, and then once that stability, then we can start paying down our unfunded liability. Because, for example, if we paid down $1 million of our unfunded liability, we would actually see about a 1 percentage point decrease in our contribution rate. So that would then in turn start saving us money on our pension costs. But as you can see, we went from 20.7 million in unfunded liability to 21.6 million in unfunded liability. So just 1 year, our unfunded liability went up $900,000. So I really don't want to advise that we start paying money down on something that could change again.
What do you advise?
To
Just continue to set something aside.
Right, continue to save money. So then when it does stabilize, we have the funds available to then start paying it down at a more aggressive rate.
And do you see that as an impact on the budget process for this go around, as far as historically what we've set aside, which was just last year?
Right.
So are we putting more in or about the same?
I think it's definitely something as we go through this budget process, we look at earmarking some dollars for and start having that money set aside. So.
Question, is there a standard that one should be shooting for, the unfunded liability relative to your normal operation?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because a couple years ago was a report out of Berkeley College, and it was, do public pensions really need to be 100% funded? And I mean, the answer is no. If James Vincent Group, if we have a pension, we need to be 100% funded, because we can close our doors tomorrow, and then the members in the pension aren't going to receive the benefit that was promised them if the plan's not 100% funded. That's the whole concept behind 100% funding. 100% funding means if contributions stop today, the plan can meet its obligations that have been laid out. Well, in the government sector, especially in public safety, that assumption's not a real assumption that Sedona Fire is going to cease operations at some point and not have new firefighters coming in and staffing the ranks and continuing to pay in. So really, the ideal percentage is probably around 80 to 90%, not necessarily 100% funded, but 80 to 90 is a more reasonable funding, and we're at 57% right now. So,
You have homework to do.
The one thing that concerns me in everything I've heard is if it's based on earning 7.x% every year, and we've never done that. When it's spread out over many years, that's not what we earn. And what you're seeing is for each small amount less that we earn, our unfunded liability goes up quite a bit.
Yeah.
That is of concern.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It is, and so the concern is, you know, or I guess the thought process is, they gonna eventually lower the earnings assumptions to what they expect?
Right.
And we're gonna see a big increase in our contribution rate, we're gonna see a big increase in our unfunded liability. But then if it stabilizes though, then at least we have a target to start working towards. Whereas right now, I mean, some people look at it as the mortgage, but it's not a mortgage because this principal keeps changing. So. Did you have something?
Oh, no, I'm trying to grasp, put my arms around the whole thing. So when it comes to the budget process, if you have the ability to raise your budget so that you have funds to add towards the unfunded liability, of course, you're taking real money from the taxpayers, actually, and putting it into this account, but you don't know that you really need all that much money eventually. So it's sort of a shell game in a way, sort of.
I have to be cautious. Last time I spoke poorly of PSPRS in a board meeting, I got a phone call from a senator. And the Phoenix Union was wanting to know who I was as well. So I think PSPRS is working towards finding that stability because and they'll admit it has not been there in the past. So you're right. It's until we see that stability, there's no point in taking good taxpayer dollars and putting them in this fund that we don't know what's going to happen to it next year.
And it doesn't affect the quality of services now,
Right.
anyhow.
Right. Correct.
Okay.
So, but by statute, you adopted a policy last year that we are going to address the unfunded liability. Our current position is we are addressing it over the 20-year amortization. So that's that amount that's calculated into our annual contribution rate. So that's the minimum that we need to pay. We are doing that, and we'll continue to evaluate additional funds to address the need. So,
Okay.
all right. I think that was it. Yep.
Any questions?
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Gabe. I appreciate that. Okay. That was our update. Next item on the agenda is our staff, or our chief's report from staff. Chief?
Thank you, Board. Thank you, Chair. Beginning the chief's report with our incident summary, we did turn the new year. So looking at January, when you compare January to last year, January at this time, January is very busy for us. And you can see the breakdown on the types of calls that we responded to in January. I lost it on mine, so I'm looking up at the board now. I don't know what happened.
It's a decent difference in terms of how many more calls compared to, it was 307 last year to date, and 369 this year.
Yeah.
That's quite a
It's quite a jump percentage-wise, I think. So that's something to note. You know, we're looking at a pretty high level in terms of just the response volume. And we do have the breakdown between rescue, EMS, fire, service, off-district, et cetera. But that does impact, obviously, the service when we're out responding to more calls. And I think when you look at the next slide, and we talk about the 90th percentile of our response time in January, it was 10 minutes, 16 seconds. Last year, January, was 8:54, and this year, 10:36. Now, as we noted, we ran quite a few more calls. So, obviously, if you're running more calls and units are tied up on more calls, there's an impact there. And again, we don't run a 1 month. Is not really a trend, but it is good to look at, and we'll continue to watch it. And then you looked on the next slide, our average response time. Comparatively, again, in 2020 January, it was 6:31, and then in 2019 January, 6:07. So again, possibly reflective of that we're responding to more emergencies. And what type of those emergencies too. If we have resources committed to a rescue that takes 3 hours, obviously that's an impact to the other resources because they're going to have to respond into that first due if there's another call for service. So, and then looking at the calls for service by station, again, Station 1 has our highest call volume. And I think I like this slide just noting how much we're assisting each other in our first due. Again, you know, that's what the whole fire district's about. You spread the 5 stations out as evenly as possible. And then the closest unit to that call that's available, that's the one you dispatch. So you can see we're backing each other up quite a bit, probably especially with the ambulances.
Chief, something,
Yes, ma'am.
the number of fires, not only did our total responses go up, but the number of fires almost tripled from 3 last January to 8
Right.
this one, which takes a lot longer to, those are incidences that keep our firefighters out in the field longer.
Correct, and it could, and depending upon what type of fire response, it could be we could look at those, it could be a vehicle, which typically is one single company. If it's a building, yeah, we're gonna send more resources. And then what kind of fire? If it's a kitchen fire, let's say, the resources might be there a little longer. So again, I think that's noted as we assist each other in our first due. You know, what type of calls are we responding to, and then how long are units committed? In terms of our operations tonight, I'm going to defer over to Division Chief Mazulis, who, as we know, it covers our trained EMS. Chief Coyle, our Assistant Chief over Operations, he's actually teaching our state incident management teams this week, so he's down in Tucson. So we're going to defer the operations section to Chief Mazulis.
Hello. So speaking to the significant events, we had the Black Lab rescue, which was some folks were out hiking and their dog got in a precarious spot, and it was not safe for them to attempt to get their dog out by themselves. So we got up there and got some rope systems and assisted them down. And you know, we take care of our 4-legged friends as well, because you know, we get some pushback, but ultimately, so we do nothing, and then obviously they're going to attempt to rescue their dog, and then somebody's injured in an environment where we could have mitigated that from the get-go, and it's just the right thing, you know. And then the owl, which I thought was a pretty cool story. We had an owl stuck in a fence, and then Captain Ojeda's wife, who works with a local wildlife recovery group, they got it unstuck. It was unable to fly, and they took it to the recovery center and checked it out, and the owl, dubbed Sedona, was released by our crews a short time later and flew off into the night to mitigate rodent problems in the village of Oak Creek. And then wildland-related activities, no deployments or wildfire to report. We do have the truck, the Type 3 outfitted, and we're now moving into the training for the truck, and that'll happen as we do our annual wildfire refresher training, and which is ongoing. Our crews are doing their pack test, which is the 3-mile hike at the high school with 45 pounds, and getting that certification complete. And then as part of the ramp up for summer, we're going to have the truck going around and doing the training on it, because it's got a few things that are different than our other vehicles. It can pump water without using the truck's motor. And so it's got some different ways you put it in to pump and stuff. So I want to make sure guys are up to speed on it. PTO. And PTO, yeah. I was trying to explain it without getting technical. But staffing the telecom position, I think Bob Moats is currently working on getting the draft language for the job description put together, and that's ongoing. So they're just kind of gearing up, getting a lot of training completed, and gearing up operationally for the summer.
If I could just speak, unless there are other questions on the operations. Yeah, in terms of the IT position, my understanding is we're down to the final draft on the job description. So, my expectation, if not the end of this week, I'll get it next week to review it, and then we can get that initiated.
Get a job announcement out.
It does.
So we'll move to Division Chief Davis, our fire marshal, for community risk reduction.
Good evening, Board. Another busy month in community risk reduction. It just doesn't ever seem to slow down. Had 195 inspection activities. As you can see, the engine company inspections, although those never ceased, now with Emily back in GIS, our new GIS specialist, we have those numbers. The crews accomplished 34 of those last month. Plan reviews, when I first got here, it seemed that we were doing about 35 to maybe 45 plans reviews in a busy month. And for the last 3 months, they have been over 50 each month. And 1 month, I believe, was 65 or 69. So those are definitely increasing. But you can see all the construction activity going on and how busy the contractors are. So that's really no surprise.
And if I could ask a question on that, is that limited to commercial, new commercial, or does it include residential homes too?
It includes residential. It also includes tenant improvements on existing structures as well. Fire investigations. We completed 2 last month. There's one still ongoing from January 31st. That should be wrapped up shortly. That has been a rather extensive fire investigation. I would estimate that we probably have somewhere between 100 and 120 hours of staff time invested in that one investigation. We had 3 events as far as public education goes, made 54 contacts with citizens in our district. Last month, we did issue the certificate of occupancy for both the Oak Creek Mini Storage and the Element Hotel. So those are both up, open, operating, and by all accounts, it sounds like they're extremely busy. I know that the hotel was pushing to get their certificate of occupancy because they were sold out their first 3 nights that they were open. So they had huge motivation to meet all of the expectations and get that C of O. For the safety message tonight, I'd like to talk about burn season and open burning. Starting on March 1st, only a couple of weeks away, our spring burn season opens. You do need a permit to burn within the Sedona Fire District, and when you get a permit, which you can get here right at the main station, when you do get the permit, you do have to call and activate it. It's extremely important that you make sure that you're only burning yard waste, trimmings from your rose bushes, leaves, those sorts of things. Prohibited items include but are not limited to rubber, trash, garbage, tires, electrical wiring, batteries, ammunition, heavy metals, pesticides, and we saw a burn pile last week that had most of those things in it. And any material that creates dense smoke or noxious odors. Safe practices when burning yard waste are keep your piles no larger than 3 cubic yards, which is a pile about 4.5 feet by 4.5 feet by 4.5 feet. So that gives you a good idea of what you should, how large you should keep the piles. It's easy to control them, and it promotes for good burning of all the material inside the pile. You want to keep it away from structures and an area clear to vegetation. Never use gasoline or other flammable materials when igniting your burn pile. Have a means nearby to control the fire. A shovel is good, a fire extinguisher is good, a garden hose is better. Fires must be attended by a person at least 18 years of age, and never walk away from your burn pile while it's still burning. Make sure that the fire is cold, dead, and out before you decide to go in the house and call it a day. That's all I have. Any questions?
Any questions?
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Good message.
Very many fire permits to be taken out.
I believe last year, if I remember correctly, we issued around 140 or 150 burn permits. Now, I don't know how often, I'm sure some of those permits never get activated, and I'm sure some people burn 20 times a year. So, but there was around 140 or so burn permits issued last year.
Is there a difference in a burn permit, agricultural burn versus another type of burn?
Well, yeah, so agricultural, anything that has to do with a true farming practice would be different, and that would be issued by the state, whereas the burn permits for the yard debris are just for 1 to 2 family dwellings,
Okay.
private homeowners, those sorts of things.
Got
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Division Chief Mazulis, training EMS and fleet.
Hello again. Busy month with training. These next few months are really busy. Towards the tail end of this month, we got a lot of our EMS, our medical refreshers out of the way. We've got our driver's training complete this year, and it's everybody goes through a cone course and is recertified to drive the apparatus, and they've got to drive an ambulance and a fire truck. So it's a good refresher for everybody. Folks continue to work on their task books. We had a couple people finish their task book, which is a guidebook on preparing you for the next rank, and you have to go through a series of events and competencies, and once approved, then you're allowed to act in that position. And it's twofold, a great opportunity. This program affords folks the opportunity to have a roadmap to their future promotions, and then secondary to that, once they've certified in the position above them, they can what we call act in that position, which gives us more flexibility with staffing and affords us the opportunity to fill those spots when people are sick and vacation and things like that. So and it lets them act up into the position efficiently with a guide. Just doing a ton of training as usual. With EMS, I put on your inter-facility transport matrix. We had a couple questions about, we talk a lot about response times, and primarily the response time reports that you folks get is related to emergency response, 911 response. And I just want to take a quick moment to highlight the partnership we have with NAH and how we manage inter-facility transports. So in the state of Arizona, the only statute regulating inter-facility transport is for the air ambulance companies. Ground ambulances don't have any statutory requirements on response time. That's been an issue and hasn't been an issue for as long as I've been here and well before me. But ultimately what we do is we provide transport from the Sedona Emergency Center to a higher level of care if a patient's determined to need it. And that generally means a Flagstaff area hospital, Cottonwood, or even Phoenix. With that, they're termed by the state as an unscheduled non-emergency inter-facility transport. And with our organization, we ran into a couple of issues with concerns about response times. So we got with NAH, and we built a 3-tiered system now that we've been using for about 8 months with great success and tracking the numbers, and it looks good. And essentially how it works is if the hospital, somebody needs to go to the catheterization lab, or somebody's got a respiratory emergency or something, the Sedona Emergency Center calls 911, and we show up as we would for an emergency call and get them down there. And it's still an inter-facility, but it's expedited. And then we have a second tier, which is we call it inter-facility surgical. And what that is somebody's got an acute appendicitis or some other procedure that there's a surgeon or a team activated to operate on them, and they're going essentially from Sedona Emergency Center to a surgical suite or to a procedural room, and we have to be there within an hour to transport that person. And then lastly, we have our tier 3s, and that's a general transport. They're going to the observation or telemetry unit, they're going to a medical surgical floor for maybe a procedure the next day, and so on and so forth. And with those transports, we have a 3-hour window to get there. And some people say, well, 3 hours, that's crazy. Well, the reason we did that is, one, they're in a hospital, they're in an environment getting treatment, and we're facilitating getting them to a higher level of care, but it hasn't been deemed emergent. And what it allows us to do, and primarily our battalion chiefs to do, is manage those inter-facilities better, interweaving them with our 911 transports and emergencies. So, for example, if we get an inter-facility to Phoenix, it's about a 5-hour round trip. And so 2 hours later, there's another inter-facility to Cottonwood. That gives our battalion chief the flexibility to delay that second transport a little bit, so that Phoenix transport is coming back and close enough that we don't strip all our ambulances for non-emergency unscheduled calls. And so that's why we came up with that matrix. And I just wanted to review it, because we've had a few questions recently from the public about the why and how it works. And to be honest, when researching these tiered times, I couldn't find anything in the state that really is as defined as what we're doing here. And so far, it's been great with NAH, and we've had good success with it. Yes, sir.
Is there a time when a decision is made not to transport those non-emergency calls and utilize private ambulances?
Absolutely.
And what would trigger that?
If anything's going to fall outside of the tiers I just described, or some of it, quite honestly, is intuition. If we've had 2 calls to Slide Rock, it's getting hotter, drier, traffic's backed up to the chapel, our battalion chief might say, you know what, call Verde Valley Ambulance and check availability. And there is a hard, fast rule if we're not going to meet our tiered time requirements, that we'll get typically Verde Valley Ambulance, maybe Guardian sometimes. But ultimately, some of it's intuition. If the district's not feeling right, and our battalion chiefs haven't proven us wrong yet, but based on traffic and weather and things like that, we may send one to a private ambulance company.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions for Chief? No?
Well, you bring up my curiosity as to how does traffic impact the operation of the fire district? And like spring break is around the corner. Does that mean there's a different protocol in place in anticipation that Crook Hill could be backed up and 179?
I think the work of previous administrations and kind of how we've laid out our stations, we're already pre-positioned and prepared for that traffic. Ultimately, ensuring our guys know their areas, know the emergency access and response areas they can get to, and just keeping track on a day-to-day basis. And our battalion chiefs do a great job of really watching the traffic, and they'll give their stations a heads up. Hey, Station 6 will call and say, hey, traffic's to Chapel now. And then they'll get that heads up. And in Google Maps, if you haven't used it, that red, green, yellow is pretty darn accurate.
No,
and
I
so,
use it all the time.
yeah.
And it's almost scary how accurate it is.
Yeah, it'll say in quarter mile it stopped, and there you go. And so, our duty chiefs and our crews do a really good job with the mapping systems and adjust functionally. And I think they do a great job with it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Great. Director of Administrative Services, Heidi.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the board, we're here to talk about recent events or upcoming events. So we keep talking about AFTA. First it was leading up and now it's over, and many of us attended AFTA either as presenters, a couple of them right here at the table, or as attendees. A lot of good information that we're trying to action on. So some of the pieces that we looked at were the anatomy of a station build, which is really a great session that we could attend. Some really great pieces on wellness and fitness and finance, and also on grant writing. So we've all kind of taken an active role in that, looking at what we can do and what we can implement. So those conferences are always valuable, and we're looking at it. The picture here is from the Run Sedona event, which isn't on the little itemized list, but successful event. Our EMS staff was there, ready to serve, and as far as I know, there weren't any major incidents, so that is always good. And we like to partner with the city and events that are happening in the city, so we can just be available and make sure that we're good cooperators. Upcoming, we have the St. Patrick's Day Parade. It's another city event, and we will lead it off as we usually do with the fire department and the police department, each having their vehicles out there. As I understand it, every board member intends to be there participating in some manner. Is that correct? Not Jean.
Absolutely.
You're not gonna wear your outfit this
Yes.
year.
No, we couldn't do it. We have
So sad.
we have a Prescott chapter meeting.
Fine then, we strike that from the minutes, and we won't have them all there. But we will be there, for the parade. It's always a good time, nice family event, for our spring. We have been working on the chief of the fire, and I'm sorry, I keep saying fire when I'm trying to say police. The fire chief and the police chief have been working together for some time, trying to come up with a community event for both of our organizations that will be family and operational and administrative involved. We've set that date. Coming up in April, we're working on a venue and what the contest will be for fire to prevail over police, all in good fun, but it will be just another way to foster that community between the two organizations, and we're really looking forward to it. Hope that to become an annual event.
That might be a flag football.
That is an idea.
Unknown, yes. We want to keep
Thank you.
everybody healthy, but it'll definitely be a family event and an opportunity for both police and fire to be together and
Is it,
enjoy that
is
time.
it a picnic kind of setting?
Yes.
Good idea.
Yes, details to come. But look forward to that. Another upcoming event, and I really put it on here, it's far off here coming in August, but the Fire Rescue International Conference, it moves around the United States annually and well attended by fire chiefs and upper administration of the fire service. And it is coming to Phoenix, Arizona for the first time in its history this coming August. And they have put together a marketing committee to try to get local fire districts in the area to really try to promote that and encourage attendance so that we can get a good representation from the locals for this international affair. And I have joined as the representative from the Sedona Fire District on that marketing committee. So they're helping us get some materials together, educational platforms and reasons to attend, and trying to make it as approachable as possible. They've changed their format, so it's a little bit more entertaining as well as educational, not the same lecture format that we're used to a lot of conferences, trying to make it a lot more interactive. So look for more information as we continue to meet. I'll continue to share that with the group.
August in Phoenix.
August in
That's cute.
Phoenix,
Oh,
it
yeah, good.
is affordable.
Perfect month.
It is affordable, that is,
That is true.
and it's all indoors, so it'll be okay. All right, staffing updates, we've been talking about those, putting kind of the two together. So you might recall our staffing vacancy was from an accounting position that was vacated a year and a half ago now, and yep, that's about right. And we put a lot of those accounting responsibilities onto JVG, so they added another layer of their performance that we contracted out, but it left a lot of clerical items that were unfulfilled here locally, and we've been kind of piecing that together, and it has really disrupted the flow. And so we know we needed a new piece. We were shorthanded when we started, and we've toyed around with what that idea of the position would be. And we've gone through a couple different iterations, but what we finally came up with was essentially a reclassification of the great Carrie Tarver over there. I said that so she could type it about herself. Reclassifying her position as it was intended when she first applied for Sedona Fire, elevating it to that true executive assistant level of a performance, a lot more project related, serving the needs of all of the executive leadership and the needs of the board, which she had been doing all along. It just wasn't reflected in her title and responsibilities, and it is now. And then what we're removing are some of those lower level clerical pieces that she can delegate, and that I can delegate, and that we're gonna put onto an administrative generalist position. So not an expert in any area, but with a good background in accounting, in clerical work, in project following up, but not necessarily leadership. We have to date 57 applications for this position, received with a full week and a half left to receive applications. So human resources will quite busy sorting through, and we're very excited about the interest. To us, that means that we are a good employer and that we have a marketable position out there, and so we're excited to see what that looks like. The last thing on staffing updates is our award nominations. So we put out an all call for award nominations, and that committee met last week. They have declared the recipients of all of our awards save one, which we have re-put out a call for nominations on. The city will honor our firefighter of the year and our administrative staff positions of the year at their council meeting on February 25th. Are we announcing them today, or we are not? We
I
are
think
not.
we'll
We're
hold till we fill the
holding
other
that.
position.
But if you're interested on a preview, you could attend the city council meeting where those those positions will be honored. We will be there to honor them. We will honor them here at our March board meeting, and they will receive their awards with their family, friends, whoever they would like to have come with, so that you can acknowledge with us their excellent work. And then my mental health moments has two components to it. The first responder health and wellness training, I went through that. It was started at AFTA, the keynote speaker, and then a couple of the sessions addressed health and wellness. They're addressing it three parts through the 100 Club, which started out for police and is now enveloping fire. And it's talking about three different areas of wellness: a physical wellness, a mental wellness, and a fiscal wellness, which is a really interesting component that they've added. And I am intrigued that they're going there, and they're presenting very practical ideas and really good information to help you prepare for your future and your life after the fire district, or for the case of police, for them as well. And then the second is that the kind of the mental health moment is kind of tied in to February, which happens to be Heart Month. So the American Heart Association has called February Heart Month. I'm wearing red. And it's just calling to light that notion that the heart and the mind are connected, and that a lot of the things that affect your heart negatively also impact your mental well-being. And there are things that, for us in the fire service, run paramount. It's being under stress, it's dehydration, and it's sleep deprivation. They're the biggest causes of heart problems, and those things also impact your mental well-being. All of those stressors can cause a combined effort, and we just don't have enough good hormones in our body to take care of it if we're depleting one area and not doing another. So it's really just kind of that focus this month of taking care of your heart and also taking care of your mind, because it all goes together. And that's the end of my report, unless there's any questions or comments.
Nope, any questions? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Great,
Okay,
thank you,
Chief, that
Heidi.
brings it back to you for the strategic plan overview.
Yes, so you can see our status update on our strategic plan. In March, we do have a meeting scheduled with staff. At our last meeting with staff regarding our strategic plan, what we discussed and what we decided is to, as we evaluate that plan, which is constantly being evaluated, we really are trying to make an effort to line up the goals and objectives of that plan with our division leaders' responsibilities. Also line up the goals and objectives with those division leaders' budget responsibilities. So we're really making an effort to integrate that. I think that's a good step. And so when we meet in March, we will look through improvements on that staff have been working on the last couple months, and then hopefully continue to walk that down and align it so our strategic plan is aligned with those responsibilities of each staff member, then also aligned with the budget, which budget in a way is a strategic plan. So I'm excited on that and how we're walking that down. Our Station 4 construction process, I have a meeting with staff regarding forming our internal committee that will be giving input and assessing need as we look at the construction project. Also, I've reached out to a consultant with the idea of sitting with staff and that consultant and discussing a potential feasibility study for our site. As we know, one of the things that's taken a little time is to evaluate the site in terms of easements with the various entities and utilities that we have on that property. So property's a pretty complex site for us, and of course it's evolved over the last 50 years. So the potential, we're going to walk down the potential to do some kind of a feasibility study so that we're confident that that is viable. So forming that internal committee, doing the feasibility study, we have some meetings coming up here in March. And then again, parallel to that is the finance component, again, looking at the potential ways we can build that project, and then also moving towards where we can get that initial potential cost so we can make sure it's viable. So hopefully over the next couple months, we can start to have a couple answers in those areas. And then I think if we get a roadblock, we'll present it, and then we'll continue to move with the best plan possible. In terms of purchase orders between 10 and 25,000, we already mentioned earlier in the budget report when we looked at the telecommunications, the microwave radio tower work at 18,000, and then also we're initiating another round of blue card training, which is our operational training with the incident command system that we've trained our leadership and our staff and our operations people to that level. We're going to continue to train and make sure we're very thorough with that training so that as an organization we're on the same page operationally and also in the valley and as a region. No new grant activity to report. In terms of our social media public outreach, we had 255 new page likes. Our post reach of 120,000 plus, an engagement of 64,000. Most engaged was interesting. I hope everyone saw the post on the pollen.
Yeah.
You know, we've got
The
some
clouds.
inquiries and calls. I even was a little bit anxious for a moment when I looked up into the canyon one morning and said, well, I hope that is either dust or dirt and not smoke. And then I think it was Fire Marshal John said, that's pollen. To which I replied, what? So I think that was really getting ahead of it because we were starting to get some inquiries. And it's quite amazing, but thank God it's not smoke. So that, but it's obviously that was one of the really interesting ones, and people are interested. And of course the dog rescue and the owl released. You know, the two. Yeah, go ahead.
Is that the picture of the dog rescue that we were staring at?
Yes.
It is? Yes.
Yes.
It's nice to see.
Well, and
How'd
you
the
know,
dog get there?
well, and actually, he did slip. Yeah, he was off leash and he slipped. So fortunately, he didn't panic and he stayed on the ledge he was at. You know, which is a concern if we go to rescue the dog. Hopefully, he doesn't panic. He didn't. But you know, and a note on the animal rescues, really, in these two cases and in many more that we get, we're really the only organization out there equipped to do not only a successful but a safe rescue. You know, usually it'll go through different entities, animal control, fish and game, whatever we call them, but they might not be necessarily equipped to do it. So I think, you know, those are important rescues. It's important for us to move methodically and safely. And again, we are available really in all risk type of capacity to be available for that. And when someone calls 911, I need help with this animal, and it goes to everyone and they say, well, no one will do it. Well, the firefighters will. And again, we have to be measured and methodical and careful. You can see any kind of rescue when we're up on rock and we need to be secured by a high angle rope system, we're going to follow our normal protocols and do it safely. So, and not take chances. So, but it's important to know we're pretty equipped to do that. So it's not uncommon to get that service call. So, and then we had a nice thank you letter in regards to an emergency medical service call that we responded to, which we know we do that frequently. And You know, from a technical standpoint, we have very good paramedics. They're highly trained. They have good leadership. I think we implement not only the current protocols, but we're always very innovative and trying to get ahead of the current protocols and pilot anything we need to improve. So this not only validates it, but the other component on that is just how we interact with that family and that member, and we try to have what we call a doctor with good bedside manner. We're always trying to react in a professional way. We all know sometimes that good bedside manner is more impactful than even the protocols that we follow. So we bear that in mind. It's part of our safe, friendly, and dedicated service. So please read that when you get a chance. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chief. Is there any other input from the board before we move on? Well, I'd like to thank you and your staff for putting together another comprehensive, review, and they make it difficult for us to ask questions when they're so complete on their presentation. So, thank you for that.
I would like to make a comment.
Yes, sir. Have at it.
I'd like to thank the individual who's sitting out here in the audience for attending. So often, we encourage our citizens to do so. And unfortunately, not too many people attend, and thank you. Thank you very much.
For those of you who have not introduced yourself to our audience participant, that is Janet Jablow, wife of Council Member Scott Jablow, who's taken an interest in our board meetings and has chosen to attend. So thank you for being here. Next item on the agenda is discussion, possible action, review and approval of the lease agreement with AT&T for Station 4 generator access. Chief Coyle is not here. I'm not so sure if we're going to give it to Bill.
Yep.
So Bill, if you
We'll have Bill go ahead and give the update on that.
This is the easement that never goes away.
Yep.
It's a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. You probably all know that we mapped out all the easements located on Station 4, sent it to AT&T. They contacted us back and wanted to know all those lines were, and we were pleased to let them know that several of theirs from days gone by back when they were singular, which is way back in the day. And so we asked them to get back to us about consolidating some of those easements. They did so this morning. We had a long 2-hour conversation with them and our engineer about how to do that. It's very productive. At the end of the day, they've agreed to pay the expenses necessary to have our engineer reroute some of their stuff so that we can get it out of the way, so when you move your station over to the new location, it won't be there. So this was probably the best progress we've had in a month or two. I was really pleased to hear from them. So we're underway. I think maybe I'd like to call this the last go-round, but I said that last month, so I'm going to hold my tongue a little bit, but it looked it was very productive meeting with them, and they were very cooperative. It just took a long time to get to this spot. So our engineers now are developing some new plans at AT&T's expense. We've already prepared the necessary easement. We're just waiting for now the detail to attach to it.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's really good news, because that's going to then help when we have this feasibility study. They'll know what they're working with,
Yeah.
Correct.
or mostly know what they're working with.
Yeah, they confirmed that their utilities are far enough underground, they don't think they'll have any trouble with your new foundation. I'm a little surprised to hear that, because I hope
Because
they
it's
know
all
that-
rock.
Well, I
How
hope they
deep?
know what
Yeah.
this stuff weighs. I mean, it's not just a little concrete you guys put down. Yeah, but they seem to be comfortable with it. They said this is what we do, so they're all good. We did discover some APS easements that they happen to be married to. I didn't realize that. So we're gonna have to call APS and figure it out with APS. But it's headed the right direction. Looks like we'll be able to simplify our lives soon.
Okay. Any other further input from that, from the board? No? Bill, thank you for your constant working on that. It's a slow progress, but progress nonetheless. So thank you very much. The last item on the agenda is a board member item, and it's basically states that the update from board members regarding fire district related activities since our last board meeting. And I had asked that this be added to the agenda to allow the public to see what the board goes through in the course of a month. We just don't come here and meet once a month and then go back about our business. Our business involves fire district activity almost every day, and between the 5 of us. And I asked the board members if they could put together a few things that included their involvement as it related to the fire district. And I have no idea what they may have come up with, but I will start on my immediate left with Gene and see if there was anything you had involvement with this past month since our last meeting.
Well, yes, as a matter of fact, it had to do with a report given by Ed with regard to citizens' concern. I was approached by someone that at a local business, he knew that I was on the board and felt comfortable enough to come to me, and he had a concern about some response times. I took his information. I contacted our chief, and our chief in turn assigned Chief Mazulis to that. And for that, thank you. I continue to do business at this particular place, and I feel comfortable the next time I go in that we met we answered his questions. And that's important for all of us, because we're out in the public, and we have a responsibility. We're elected officials, and we have a responsibility to listen and respond. For that, I thank the staff here for helping that particular gentleman with his concern.
Thank you. That's good. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Corey?
Well, yes, thank you. I think 2 items I have. I had the pleasure of meeting with Chief Trotline and going over some input regarding up-and-coming budget items that I wanted to learn more about, but also let him know some of the places, some of my opinions about them. So it was very fruitful. I had nice education about staffing needs that I appreciated more in detail than I've been familiar with so far. So thank you for that, Chief. And then secondly, I have had a couple, in fact, just today, but over the course of the last month, questioning about the one outstanding investigation, John, that we have, I believe, on that New Year's Eve incident fire. Just wondering, citizens are interested in this. What's the final call on the cause of that fire? So I've let them know it's pending.
Yes, it is pending. The investigation is not complete. We are still waiting from some test results from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. I don't expect any surprises there, but until we get final word from them, it is still pending. That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. And off to my right?
Well, I also met with the chief last month, and matter of fact, we do it again tomorrow. And this is part of my continuing education and learning. There's so many moving parts to the fire district and personnel and roles. There's a lot of words, titles that engineer and captain and chief. I mean, at times it sort of gets past me. So this is my attempt to try to get up to speed on all this, including in this. Last week, I spent some time over in Station 4 with Pat Ojeda.
Ojeda?
Ojeda.
Yes.
My Spanish coming in. And that was interesting. And we were waiting for a call that did not come, so I didn't get to go out with the group. But if I had been there the next day, I think they had 2 or 3 calls. It was really quite interesting. I even got to have lunch with the group, with the people on staff that day. And actually, I found it really helpful to understand what does the world of a fireman look like on a day-to-day basis, because do they just sit around and play cards? They don't. They're all doing something, knowing that whatever they're doing can be interrupted at a moment's notice when a call comes in. And I'm actually going to ask Pat if I can do this again, maybe sometime in mid-March. And I look forward to actually being out on a call in an ambulance or a fire engine. Either way, I want to be able to speak with some degree of educated authority. This is what the real world is like. The other thing I did is I was involved with the marathon, and I knew that the marathon, this was the first big event for the community that our Chief Troutwine was involved in, and I was there managing all the parking about 700 cars. It worked pretty well, pretty seamless. But I got the opportunity to go down into where the marathon or the Run Sedona was taking place, and I got to see you in the command station there from Cottonwood, that big RV, and it actually looked like a real military operation. So I was rather impressed with that, and I hope you got something out of it.
Yeah, very good event.
And nobody got hurt, and it was a great event, and they're looking forward to it again next year. I hear all the backstory of what went on that was welcomed and anticipated, and nothing that would keep them from coming back next year doing it again.
I'd like to ask Al a question. Al? And thank you very much for your volunteering with regard to every year. You're right there, and as was this gentleman, gentleman here,
as a matter of fact,
to assist you. But my question is, with regard to your experience at Station 4 and having lunch. Part of the experience is cleaning up and doing the dishes. Did they allow you to participate in that part?
No, they didn't. But see, they all got a message. My last duty day for the United States Army was KP. Last duty day, this was in October of 1969, and KP is not high on my list of things that I like to do. But I will next time.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be a valuable experience for you.
And I will admit this too, because Dave and another person helped us do the marathon parking. Normally we have 6 or 7 people. We had 3 people, and it actually worked real well because Dave takes charge.
Oh, Lonnie did some of that. Lonnie did some of that.
No, Lonnie takes charge too.
You know, one thing that I was unaware of when I took this position as the board chair was the involvement of the chair in its regards to the relation with not just the fire chief, but to the rest of the district. And to a small degree, I envy the fact that you guys' involvement is concise and to the point. Because as I started putting my pen to the paper, my list grew and grew and grew. And it all started out with the January 16th through the 18th, we attended the Arizona Fire Districts Association's annual conference. But I wasn't the only one there. There was about 8 of us there in totality. So I was but one. And the classes I took were absolutely, you know, I won't say the very best, because I've had a lot of good classes before, but I think the fact that I didn't have to take statutory classes, I took classes that kind of sparked my interest more than the statutory stuff. But yeah, but I enjoyed those, and we talked about I did go to some of the required classes, but the budget related updates and financial report reading and the PSPRS updates. Those were informative, as well as audit components and fraud detection. Those were all stuff that were interesting to me as I attended the class. Later on, just shortly thereafter, the PSPRS had their annual conference down in Phoenix. And again, I was but one of 5 people from Sedona Fire that attended. And again, a lot of good things, much which Gabe described to today in his report. One of the things that's kind of a fun deal is the Chamber of Commerce. They have their monthly mixers, and believe it or not, there was 4 different personnel from Sedona Fire there, and it's always good to interact with business owners, community members, and just to get them to know who your fire district is. And so I had a lot of fun doing that. As a result of being the board chair for the Sedona Fire District, I'm also the board chair for the PSPRS local board. And we did have an opportunity to review one applicant going into his pension, his drop program, and we were able to review the actuarials as we did with Gabe today. A fun thing that I participated in, is I attended with the chief the Benevolent Order of Youthful Seniors, otherwise known as the Boys Club. And there were women there, so it wasn't just a boys club. And it was basically a meet and greet, the chief and the board chair. So we had a great time. They're a lively group, high-spirited, and it was tables kind of set like this, and the salvos were going back and forth, and it was kind of fun to see and entertaining. But a lot of good people, a lot of people that are well-known in the community. Constantly meeting with the chief. I can't tell you how many times we've met with the chief. Obviously, with open meeting laws, we cannot speak more than just the two of us. Third forms a quorum, so I have to be careful on what I say with Gene, what I say with Corey, and what I say with Al, and also Joy. But there are times when I get together with the chief and we get to discuss some of these issues that are coming on, so that we can kind of get a flavor of where the board's going and how we're going to attack some things. Then lastly, working with Al in the marathon was a lot of fun. I did a lot of running with cars following me, going from one lot to another.
People don't realize we start when it's pitch black.
It was,
And you try to park cars
yeah,
at the old cultural park where you can't even define the parking lots, much less find them.
yeah, and then put a car in it. So with that said, that was my month in a nutshell, and it makes time go by fast, I'll tell you. So unless there's anything else, are there any other input from the board? And-
A big thank you
Oh,
for
yeah,
you doing everything that you do and taking your job as chair
We're fortunate.
very seriously.
You're
We
welcome.
are fortunate.
Thank you. You're quite welcome. So with that said, on behalf of the board, I would be remiss if I would not express the board's condolences and our sympathies towards the chief and the loss of your father. Not an easy time. So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
with that said, this meeting is adjourned. All right. Anything to sign for us?
It might be just me.